Hello, this is Rabbi Beharana Gutierrez again, and today I'd like to talk about Rabbi Isaac bar Sheshet Perfet. He's an important figure at the end of the 14th century and into the 15th century in the history of Conversos or Anusim, forced converts to Christianity. It's interesting because he never mentions this in his own writings, but we know that he himself was a converso. In 1391, in the midst of the violence that was raging across the Iberian Peninsula and the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, Valencia was one of the cities that faced the violence. And local authorities came to him and basically said, if he would convert, that the Jewish community would be spared. He declined, but then his life was threatened, and he relented and converted. Within about a year and a half, he was able to escape to North Africa, and he became the head of a religious court there, a rabbinic court. And he wrote on the topic of Conversos or Anusim in various rabbinic responsa. People from the peninsula would write to him and ask him questions that had to do with everyday Jewish issues. For example, if a converso or a conversa, a Jew or a Jewess who had converted to Christianity under duress, were to invite a practicing Jew into their home, was it acceptable to eat from the food that they provided? If they served wine, could they assume that it was kosher? There were other cases that he also wrote about. For example, if a woman had fled the peninsula and she was a conversa, was her ketubah, which had been witnessed by two conversos, was it valid? In the case of a divorce document. So there were all kinds of questions that were given to Rabbi Isaac bar Sheshet Perfet on the question of Anusim, of Conversos, and he wrote about that. And in one of his responses, he makes the comment, which is in agreement with the view of the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, that if an individual was forced to convert, then even if it meant abandoning their children or their spouses or their extended family, that they should do so. Because the ability to practice Judaism openly was to be regarded as much more important than any family collections. I think it's important to note that from a physical standpoint or emotional, psychological standpoint, that would have been very difficult for most people to do. I mean, I think of myself, having children, two young boys, and I think about the fact that if I were in similar circumstances, it would probably be impossible for me to abandon them if I had been living at that time. I can't think of any scenario in which I would have done so or would do so. The same would be, of course, for my wife or my extended family. And Isaac bar Sheshet Perfet recognizes that and says, well, many of these people stayed in Spain because they thought that they were preserving the family unity, they were helping their family members keep Judaism alive, because as a family unit they might be able to do so much easier than if they were individuals. And if they, of course, were to abandon their family, the trauma that they would undergo and things of this nature would be quite extensive. Now, we do know of cases in which one spouse would leave because the other spouse refused to do so. So in that case, you would have a fracture in the marriage. And as far as I know, I don't remember specific cases where you have like an extended family, but it's usually the wife that leaves. The husband has converted, but he doesn't want to leave, maybe for financial reasons or etc. That's a little bit different, but I think in terms of families being fractured, it's quite easy to understand the dilemma that many people faced. There were also other issues that arose, and one of the things that Rabbi Isaac bar Sheshet Perfet raises is that there were individuals, conversos, who in his time, so we're talking about the end of the 14th century and the beginning of the 15th century, that had already reached a point of maybe we can call it opportunism, where they were willing to notify or inform authorities on individuals that were planning to escape or practicing Judaism secretly, clandestinely. So there were already conversos that were aligning themselves with the church for whatever reason, maybe out of sincere belief or because they believed that doing so would secure a better position for them. I think it's also important to note that if an individual or a family were intending to leave, even though the Spanish Inquisition, as we understand it, was not in operation at the time, there were papal inquisitors, there were bishops who could initiate inquisitorial investigations. And there were punishments that could be meted out. We know that there were various punishments, typically fines, but there were other punishments that could be loving. And so any individual that was helping another converso or converso family leave was exposing themselves to prosecution. So I think those are important things to keep in mind. One closing thought on Rabbi Isaac bar Sheshet Perfet is that, again, he never mentioned his own conversion in his writings. I think in some sense, knowing that he converted is important, because I think people who saw that may have had a sense of legitimization for their own actions. If you see a very important rabbi who has buckled under, I mean, and of course, if you're being faced with the threat of death, it's understandable. I'm certainly not judging his actions, but I think in doing so, other conversos, the lay people, shall we say, were justified perhaps in their decision to have converted to save their families. And I think they would have seen that as an example. There were certainly other individuals that martyred themselves or refused to undergo conversion. But I think it's important to take note that there were different responses by different people in different circumstances. And so to basically say that anyone who converted did so because they were weak in their Jewish faith, I think is incorrect. I think we have to look at the personal circumstances of each individual and realize that anyone facing those kinds of situations would react differently. And I think that the concerns of their family would always be a major issue that they would think about. So we will continue our discussion in subsequent videos. I hope to look at other prominent personalities of the period, some people who converted sincerely to Catholicism, other people who were Crypto-Jews who practiced Judaism clandestinely, and to look at some of the characters and personalities of the 15th, and 16th and 17th centuries and their journey and trek often to return to Judaism openly. And we will see you in the next video.